The Syrian conflict, now in its second decade, represents one of the most devastating humanitarian crises of our time. Sparked by peaceful protests in 2011 that were met with brutal government crackdowns, the conflict quickly escalated into a full-blown civil war. The country fractured, with various rebel groups, including ISIS, vying for control against the Assad regime. Millions have been displaced, both internally and as refugees in neighboring countries, creating a refugee crisis of unprecedented scale. The conflict's complexity is further compounded by the involvement of foreign powers with vested interests. Russia and Iran have staunchly backed the Assad regime, providing military and financial aid, while the US and some Western allies have supported certain rebel groups. This proxy war dynamic has fueled the conflict, making a peaceful resolution seem like a distant prospect. The Syrian conflict is not just a regional crisis, it has global implications. The rise of ISIS, the use of chemical weapons, and the mass displacement of people have all raised profound questions about international security, humanitarian intervention, and the responsibility to protect civilians caught in the crossfire. As the conflict enters its 12th year, the Syrian people continue to endure unimaginable suffering. Millions are in dire need of humanitarian assistance, with access to food, water, shelter, and medical care severely limited. The once vibrant nation of Syria lies in ruins, its social fabric torn apart by violence, displacement, and despair. The United States' involvement in the Syrian conflict has been marked by a cautious and often criticized approach. The U.S. has provided support to vetted rebel groups but refrained from large-scale intervention. The Obama administration limited involvement to airstrikes and support for Kurdish forces. This cautious approach stemmed from a reluctance to be drawn into another protracted conflict. The Trump administration continued this policy, focusing on combating ISIS. The Trump administration also reduced the U.S. military presence in Syria. The Biden administration has maintained a similar posture, prioritizing counterterrorism efforts. The administration argues that a more assertive approach could destabilize the region. The U.S.'s limited involvement reflects strategic calculations and a wariness of repeating past mistakes. However, this approach has drawn criticism for failing to prevent the Assad regime's brutality and allowing Russia and Iran to expand their influence. The U.S.'s limited involvement in Syria is driven by strategic considerations, focusing on great power competition and resource allocation. The U.S. pivots towards the Asia-Pacific, countering China's assertiveness. This shift recalibrates U.S. foreign policy, emphasizing the Indo-Pacific over the Middle East, avoiding another protracted conflict after Iraq and Afghanistan. Public wariness of interventions and avoiding past mistakes, recognizing military limits in civil conflicts. Syria shows the limits of imposing will on divided nations. Addressing global challenges like climate change and pandemics demands more attention. The Biden administration emphasizes transnational threats requiring international cooperation. U.S. restraint in Syria reflects evolving priorities, avoiding overstretch, and recognizing military limits in civil conflicts. The U.S.'s limited involvement in Syria carries significant risks. One major risk is the empowerment of adversaries like Iran and Russia. Iran has expanded its military footprint, threatening Israel. Russia has bolstered the Assad regime and tested new weapons. The humanitarian crisis worsens with millions displaced. Extremism and instability grow, and the Assad regime consolidates power. The U.S.'s strategy of restraint could undermine its interests in the long run. Section 5. Assad's resurgence, consolidation of power and regional implications. Assad's regime has resurged with support from Russia and Iran, regaining control over Syria. Key cities like Aleppo and Homs have been recaptured. This resurgence has led to widespread civilian casualties and displacement. Russia's intervention in 2015 was pivotal. Iran's support has also been crucial. Assad's power consolidation impacts the region. It emboldens other authoritarian regimes. Concerns about renewed instability persist. Various armed groups continue to operate. Assad's resurgence complicates peace efforts. The regime shows little interest in negotiations. The international community remains divided. Some call for Assad's removal, others support him. This division hampers accountability for war crimes. Section 6. Iran's deepening influence, a strategic foothold in Syria. Iran has emerged as a major player in the Syrian conflict, leveraging its support for the Assad regime to establish a strategic foothold in the country and expand its influence throughout the region. Iran's involvement in Syria is multifaceted, encompassing military, political, economic, and social dimensions. Militarily, Iran has provided the Assad regime with extensive support, including weapons, training, and troops. It has also deployed its own elite military units, such as the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, to Syria to bolster Assad's forces. Beyond direct military support, Iran has cultivated a network of Shia militias in Syria, including Hezbollah, which have played a key role in fighting alongside the Syrian army. These militias have been accused of committing human rights abuses and exacerbating sectarian tensions in Syria. Politically, Iran has used its influence to shape the trajectory of the conflict, pushing for a solution that preserves Assad's rule and strengthens Iran's position in the region. It has also worked to undermine U.S. interests in Syria, viewing the U.S. presence as a threat to its own regional ambitions. Economically, Iran has sought to benefit from the reconstruction of Syria, securing lucrative contracts for Iranian companies and using Syria as a conduit for its own exports. Iran's growing influence in Syria has raised concerns among Israel and the U.S. Israel views Iran's military presence in Syria as a direct threat to its security, particularly its close proximity to the Israeli border. The U.S., meanwhile, sees Iran's entrenchment in Syria as a challenge to its regional interests and a potential obstacle to counterterrorism efforts. As the humanitarian crisis in Syria continues to escalate, international reactions have been varied and complex. Major powers, including Russia, China, and the European Union, have taken distinct stances, each driven by their own geopolitical interests and strategic calculations. Russia, having established a significant military presence in Syria, has consistently supported the Assad regime. This support has been crucial in tipping the balance of power on the ground. Moscow's involvement is not only about maintaining an ally in the Middle East, but also about projecting power and influence in the region. China, on the other hand, has primarily focused on economic investments and maintaining stability. While not directly involved militarily, Beijing has used its position in the United Nations to influence resolutions and diplomatic efforts concerning Syria. The European Union has faced a different set of challenges, particularly the influx of refugees fleeing the conflict. European nations have had to balance humanitarian assistance with domestic political pressures, leading to varied responses across the continent. Meanwhile, international organizations like the United Nations and various NGOs have been working tirelessly to provide aid and advocate for a peaceful resolution. Despite these efforts, the complex web of alliances and rivalries has made a diplomatic solution elusive. These international reactions and diplomatic maneuvers highlight the global stakes involved in the Syrian conflict. They underscore the intricate balance of power and the far-reaching implications of the crisis. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to our channel for more updates and insights. We'd love to hear your thoughts. Drop your views in the comments below. Until next time, stay informed and take care.